In 1972, a psychologist sat a 4-year-old child in a small room. On the table in front of them, he placed one marshmallow. Then he made a promise. If you wait 15 minutes without eating it, I will come back and give you a second one. Then he left. And what happened in that room over the next 15 minutes became one of the most famous experiments in the history of human psychology. Some children grabbed the marshmallow the moment the door closed. Some distracted themselves, covered their eyes, sang to themselves, turned away. Some made it the full 15 minutes. Some lasted 30 seconds. The ones who waited got their second marshmallow. The ones who did not, did not. Walter Mischel, the scientist who designed the experiment, followed these children for decades. What he found appeared to confirm something people had always suspected but never proven. The children who had waited grew up to have higher SAT scores, lower rates of addiction, better health outcomes, and more stable relationships. The ones who grabbed the marshmallow early had measurably worse outcomes across almost every category of life. The conclusion seemed clear. Self-control in childhood predicts success in life. Willpower is the foundation everything else is built on. If you can delay gratification, you will thrive. If you cannot, you will struggle. For 50 years, that conclusion was treated as settled science. Parents were coached to build willpower in their children. Schools designed programs around it. Self-help books built entire philosophies from it. The marshmallow test became the origin story of an entire generation's understanding of why some people succeed and others do not. Then, in 2018, a team of researchers at UC Irvine decided to run it again. Tyler Watts and his colleagues replicated the study. But this time, they did something the original had not. They controlled for family background, for income, for the stability of the home environment the child came from. And when they ran the numbers, the willpower effect almost completely disappeared. Almost entirely gone. What remained after controlling for background was so small it was statistically negligible. The children who had waited were not more disciplined. They were not stronger. They did not have better character. They came from more stable families. They had learned through years of lived experience that when an adult made a promise in their world, that adult came back. The children who grabbed the marshmallow immediately were not weak. They were not undisciplined. They were not destined for failure. They had learned through years of lived experience that waiting was a risk not worth taking, that in their world, adults did not always return, that the marshmallow in front of them right now was the only marshmallow they could be certain of. They were not failing a test of character. They were passing a test of reality, their reality. The child who waited was not more self-controlled. The child who waited trusted adults more. And that trust was not something they had built through discipline or practice or force of will. It was something their environment had either given them or taken from them before they were old enough to know the difference. For 50 years, society looked at the children who grabbed the marshmallow and said they lacked something. It turned out those children had learned something true about the world they were actually living in, not the world the scientist was offering them for 15 minutes. Their world, the one waiting for them on the other side of that door. And here is where it gets uncomfortable, because if the marshmallow test did not measure willpower, then 50 years of conclusions built on top of it need to be looked at again. Every time someone blamed their own failures on a lack of self-control. Every time a parent blamed their child's struggles on not trying hard enough. Every time a doctor, a teacher, a policymaker looked at someone's life falling apart and said they just could not delay gratification. Every time society looked at poverty and said if they just had more discipline. Every time it looked at addiction and said if they just had more willpower. Every time it looked at failure and said if they had just waited for the second marshmallow. They were not wrong about the marshmallow. They were wrong about what the marshmallow was measuring. It was not measuring the child. It was measuring the world the child had been given. Walter Mischel spent his life studying self-control. The 2018 study did not say self-control does not matter. It said that self-control is not a character trait distributed randomly at birth. It is a skill that grows in environments where trust is possible, where promises are kept, where waiting has been proven to be worth it. It cannot be built in a child by lecturing them about discipline. It is built by giving them a world where adults do what they say they will do, where the second marshmallow always arrives. Not every child gets that world, not through any fault of their own, and the ones who did not spent 50 years being told the problem was something inside them, when the real problem was something that had been done to them, something that happened long before they ever sat down at that table, long before they ever saw that marshmallow, long before anyone ever asked them to wait. The marshmallow was never the test. The world that child came from was the test, and that test had already been given long before the scientist walked into the room.